There are roads that lead nowhere, not because they end abruptly, or because they are blocked by fallen trees or collapsed bridges, but because they were never meant to be traveled. They are paths that emerge when something ancient decides it has waited long enough. Roads that do not appear on updated maps, that have no reliable signs, that have not received maintenance for decades, and yet they remain there, stretching for miles between forests too dense, too silent, too alive. It was on such a road that Elias Moreau entered without realizing it. He had been driving for hours, the kind of long journey where the world seems to repeat itself. Trees, gentle curves, stretches of road too straight to feel natural. The radio drifted between static and fragments of old songs, always cutting off before the chorus, as if something deliberately prevented a melody from completing itself. His phone had lost signal since sunset, and the car's dashboard displayed a time that did not seem to advance. Elias noticed this vaguely, but exhaustion made everything feel less urgent. The forest began to close in around the road almost imperceptibly. The trees grew taller, their trunks darkened by constant moisture. Branches curved over the asphalt, forming an irregular tunnel where the headlights' beams seemed to die before reaching the end. No insects struck the windshield. No animals crossed the road. There was no sound beyond the engine and Elias's own breathing, which began to feel too loud inside the car. He slowed down without knowing exactly why. The GPS flickered once more and shut off. The screen went black, reflecting only Elias's tired face, pale, eyes sunken and alert in an unnatural way. He tried restarting the device, then his phone, then the radio. Everything answered with silence. A thick silence, not merely the absence of sound, but the presence of something listening. That was when he saw the sign. It stood to the right of the road, nearly swallowed by vegetation, crooked, rusted, its paint peeling away in old layers. It did not point to any city. There were no arrows, only a single word carved in large, uneven letters, as if it had been painted by hand many times, by different people, in different eras. Corteira. Elias did not recognize the name, and strangely that unsettled him more than it should have. Right after the sign, the road seemed to change. The asphalt grew rougher, uneven, as if it had been patched countless times. The center lines were too worn to indicate any clear direction. In some places, vegetation crept so close it nearly brushed the tires. The sensation of descending intensified, even though the dashboard showed no significant incline. The air inside the car grew colder. Elias realized he was holding his breath. He exhaled slowly, trying to calm himself, but relief did not come. Something was wrong, not in an obvious way, not dramatically. It was a subtle, deep error, like a single note out of tune in a song that went on far too long. He thought about turning back. He gently turned the steering wheel, testing the idea. At that exact moment, the headlights illuminated something in the middle of the road, a silhouette. Elias slammed the brakes. The car skidded a few inches before stopping. His heart raced violently against his chest. The figure stood a few meters ahead, motionless, poorly defined amid shadows and the low mist beginning to form over the asphalt. It looked human, tall, thin, arms hanging loosely at its sides, the head tilted at an unnatural angle, as if it were watching the ground, or listening to something beneath it. Elias honked once. The sound echoed incorrectly, stretched, distorted by the forest. The figure did not react. He opened the car door just a few inches. Cold air flooded inside, carrying with it the heavy scent of wet earth, rotting leaves, and something else. Something old and metallic, reminiscent of rust and dried blood. "Hey," Elias's voice came out low and unsure. "Are you okay?" No response. The figure took a slow step to the side, allowing Elias to see what lay behind it. The road continued, but not the way it should have. The stretch ahead seemed narrower, darker, as if it were being absorbed by the forest. Trees leaned at impossible angles, their branches intertwined in patterns resembling ancient symbols, repeated endlessly. The mist grew thicker in the distance, pulsing gently, as if it were breathing. When Elias looked back at the figure, it was gone. There was no sound of footsteps, no visible movement. It simply was no longer there. The fear, until then contained, began to spread inside him. Elias slammed the car door shut, shifted into reverse, and accelerated. The car responded, but the road behind him seemed too long. The headlights illuminated only more and more trees, curves he did not remember taking. The Cortera sign did not reappear. No familiar reference point emerged. It was as if the way back had been erased. He stopped again, struggling to breathe. That was when he heard the sound. It did not come from outside. It came from the forest. A dry crack, followed by another and another, like branches snapping slowly, deliberately. Then something lower, almost a collective whisper, difficult to distinguish. They were not words. They were attempts at language, as if something were rehearsing human voices without ever having learned how to use them properly. And then, mixed into all of it, Elias heard his own name, called from afar, drawn out. Wrong. He did not answer. But the forest clearly already knew he was there. The forest remained too still. No leaf moved. No insect dared to exist within that space. The whispering had ceased. That, somehow, was worse. Elias shifted into first gear and moved forward slowly, keeping the headlights low. Every meter traveled seemed to demand an absurd effort from the car, as if the asphalt itself were heavy, almost viscous. The sensation of being watched intensified with every curve, every darker shadow between the trunks. The road began to narrow, not abruptly but gradually, almost carefully. The shoulder disappeared first, then the center line faded into an indistinct blur. In certain stretches, branches invaded the path, scraping against the body of the car with a long, harsh sound, like fingernails dragged across metal. Elias felt a chill crawl up his spine. The forest did not seem to be encroaching on the road through neglect. It seemed to be doing so by choice. That was when he saw the lights. Two faint yellowish sources flickering in the distance. They were not headlights. They were stationary. Elias felt an immediate, almost irrational sense of relief. Other people meant logic, answers, help. He accelerated slightly, ignoring the tightening knot in his stomach. As he approached, the lights revealed themselves to be lanterns hanging from improvised posts driven into the ground along the roadside. Between them, a clearing opened. Small, irregular, with 3 vehicles parked haphazardly, an old pickup truck, a dark sedan, and a white van with peeling paint. Elias parked and stepped out of the car. The air there was even colder. The scent of the forest had grown stronger, more invasive, as if it clung to the skin. He noticed marks on the ground, deep grooves, as though something heavy had been dragged repeatedly between the road and the depths of the woods. "Hello?" he called, his voice firmer than he felt. A figure emerged from between the cars. She was a woman of medium height, her hair tied back carelessly, her face marked by deep dark circles beneath her eyes. Her gaze locked onto Elias with immediate intensity, as if she were trying to decipher him within seconds. "You came in through the sign, too," she said bluntly. It was not a question. "The sign, Cortera?" Elias replied. She nodded slowly. Others began to appear. An older man with a gray beard and a hardened expression. A young couple, both utterly silent, holding hands with excessive force. Fear lived there, an old fear already settled in, like something that had learned how to exist without exploding. "My name is Marina," the woman said. "We've been trapped here since yesterday, or before that. It's hard to tell." Elias felt the ground seem unstable beneath his feet. "Trapped how?" he asked. "Didn't you try to go back?" The older man let out a dry, short laugh that carried no humor. "We tried," he said. "The road doesn't allow it." They explained slowly, each one finishing the other's sentences, as if they had already repeated the story many times. All of them had entered through the same road. All had seen the sign. All had felt the same subtle shift in the environment. And all, when attempting to return, had found themselves traveling paths that folded in on themselves, leading them back to that very spot. "The forest changes," Marina said quietly. "Not all at once. It learns the path you take, and then rearranges everything." Elias swallowed hard. "Learns," he murmured. She looked away toward the trees. "It's the best word I've found." The young couple, who had remained silent until then, finally spoke. The woman's voice trembled, almost childlike. "Something walks among the trees at night," she said. "It doesn't run. It doesn't hurry. It just circles, like it's counting us." No one disagreed. Night advanced rapidly there. The sky above the clearing became an absolute black, without stars, without moon. The lanterns cast long, distorted shadows that seemed to move even when no one did. Elias noticed markings on the nearest trunks, old carvings, repeated symbols, incomplete circles, lines resembling roads crossing and breaking. "These markings weren't here before," the older man said. "They appear." The silence that followed was heavy. Suddenly a sound echoed from the forest. Footsteps, slow, deliberate. They were not coming toward the clearing. They circled it, maintaining an exact distance from the light. Something moved between the trunks. Too large to be an ordinary animal, too small to be clearly identified. And then came the most disturbing sound. An attempt at a voice. "Ma... re..." The woman went instantly pale. "Don't answer," she whispered. "Never answer." Elias's name came next, dragged out, distorted, as if it had been learned by listening to old, damaged recordings. He felt an almost uncontrollable urge to respond. The sound tugged at something deep inside him. An ancient, intimate, dangerous memory. The older man grabbed his arm with surprising strength. "If you answer," he said through clenched teeth, "it learns better." The footsteps continued to circle. The forest watched, listened, memorized. Elias realized with chilling clarity that the place did not merely trap people. It studied them. Night fell completely without any of them realizing the exact moment when day ceased to exist. There was no natural transition, no gradual darkening of the sky. One moment there was still a grayish tone above the treetops. The next, everything was a uniform block of thick, heavy darkness, almost solid. The clearing felt smaller now, compressed by the surrounding forest, as if space itself were slowly being swallowed. They decided to stay together. The vehicles were positioned in a circle, lanterns aimed outward, forming a fragile ring of light against whatever moved beyond it. No one suggested sleeping. The very idea felt absurd. Exhaustion was there, but fear held it suspended beneath the skin, vibrating, preventing any real rest. Elias sat on the ground, leaning against his car, hugging his knees without realizing it. The silence was broken only by irregular breathing and the occasional sound of something moving among the trunks, never close enough to be seen, but always present enough to be impossible to ignore. Time began to behave incorrectly. Minutes felt like hours. Hours collapsed into spans too short to be trusted. Elias's wristwatch finally advanced a few seconds, only to jump several minutes all at once, without explanation. The older man, whose name was Ottavio, noticed the same thing on his powered-off phone, which would occasionally turn itself on, displaying impossible times, repeated dates, numbers that made no sense. "The road doesn't just trap the body," Ottavio murmured. "It traps the rhythm of things." Marina stood near the edge of the light, watching the forest with constant, almost obsessive attention. Her eyes scanned the trunks, the spaces between them, the shadows gathering where the light failed to reach. She seemed to be listening to something the others could not yet clearly hear. "It gets closer when we ignore it," she said suddenly, "and pulls back when it realizes we're paying attention." "It?" Elias asked, his throat dry. Marina hesitated before answering. "I don't know if there's only one," she said finally, "but there's something that commands the rest. Something tied to the road, to the forest, to what was left here." Before anyone could ask for further explanation, a sound crossed the clearing. A low cry. It did not come from a fixed point. It seemed to rise from several places at once, echoing between the trees, blending with the non-existent rustle of leaves. It was not the cry of an adult, nor was it exactly that of a child. It was a broken, uneven sound, as if something were trying to remember how crying works. The young couple reacted immediately. The man, Renan, jumped to his feet, eyes wide, body tense. "Did you hear that?" he asked, almost pleading. The woman beside him, Livia, brought her hands to her mouth. already crying silently. "It sounds like someone hurt," she said. "We can't just leave it like that." Marina moved fast, grabbing Renan's arm before he could take a step forward. "No," she said with absolute firmness. "Don't go into the forest. Never on the first night. What if it's a person?" he argued, his voice breaking. "What if it's someone like us?" Ottavio stepped closer, his face hard. "If it were a person," he said, "they'd ask for help properly. They'd call out. They wouldn't be rehearsing suffering." The crying stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was so deep, Elias felt his ears ache. Then something shifted in the air. A strange pressure spread through the clearing, as if space itself were being compressed. The lanterns began to flicker, one by one, not going completely out, but failing enough to warp the shadows. That was when the forest responded. Voices began to emerge, not one, many, fragmented, overlapping, some close, others too distant to locate. All of them attempting to imitate human tones, memories of voices they had heard before. Elias, Marina, Renan, come back. It's dark. The names were spoken with subtle errors, drawn-out syllables, wrong inflections, like recordings played at a slightly altered speed. Elias felt his stomach tighten. The sense of recognition was disturbing, almost too intimate. Livia stumbled backward. "That voice," she whispered. "That's my mother." Renan turned to her, alarmed. "What?" "She talks like that," Livia continued, eyes glassy. "The same way when she used to wake me up at night." Before anyone could react, Livia broke free from the circle and ran. "No!" Marina shouted. Too late. Livia crossed the line of light and vanished among the trees within seconds, swallowed by the dense darkness of the forest. Renan tried to follow her, but Ottavio and Elias restrained him by force. He struggled, screaming her name, his voice unraveling into raw despair. Silence returned. No distant screams, no pleas for help, no sound of footsteps retreating. The forest absorbed everything. Minutes passed, or hours. No one could tell. Renan now cried, curled on the ground, repeating Livia's name like a broken mantra. Marina stood motionless, eyes fixed on the spot where the woman had disappeared. "She won't give her back," Marina said quietly. Something broke inside Elias at that moment. The slow, horrifying realization that this was not merely a place of passage. It was a mechanism, a process, something that selected, separated, learned from every human reaction. The forest did not attack out of hunger. It attacked out of curiosity. And now, with Livia, it had learned something new. When the darkness began to recede, no one felt relief. There was no birdsong announcing morning, no golden tone rising on the horizon. Night simply lost density, turning into a dirty uniform gray, like a world that had forgotten how to produce real light. The forest remained motionless, far too silent, watching with the same attention as before. Livia did not return. Her name still lingered in the air, repeated countless times by Renan throughout the night, until his voice failed completely. He now sat on the ground, leaning against the van, eyes red, fixed on an empty point ahead, as if he still expected to see her silhouette emerge from between the trees. Despair had transformed into something more dangerous, a fragile, irrational hope that refused to die. Elias felt his body heavy, as if he had gone days without sleep. His muscles ached, yet there was no clear memory of rest. It was as though time had been stolen from him during the night, replaced by a continuous vigil that left no visible marks, only a deep exhaustion. Marina was the first to move. She walked toward the edge of the clearing with cautious steps, observing the ground, the trunks, the space between the trees. The gray light revealed more details now. Deep marks in the earth, fresh scratches on the trunks, as if something had been dragged forcibly into the forest. In certain spots, the soil appeared sunken, as though it had been trampled repeatedly by something heavy, yet irregular. "She didn't die," Marina said, breaking the silence. "At least, not in the way we understand it." Renan slowly lifted his face. "What does that mean?" Marina took a long time to answer. Her eyes never left the forest. "Here, nothing simply ends. she said. Things change function. Ottavio approached, leaning against one of the cars. The road feeds the forest, he added. And the forest gives something back in return. Gives back what? Elias asked, feeling a tightness in his chest. Ottavio looked at him. Learning. They decided to move on. Not out of courage, but because staying there felt worse. The clearing no longer offered the same sense of protection. The lanterns were too weak, natural light was insufficient, and above all there was the constant impression that this place had already fulfilled its initial purpose. The cars worked, partially. None of them would accept reverse gear. It was as if the concept of going back had simply been removed. The road ahead, on the other hand, remained open, winding, diving even deeper into the forest. Elias felt a shiver when he noticed the asphalt seemed darker than before, as if damp, though there was no sign of rain. As they advanced, symbols began to appear more frequently. They were not random markings. There were patterns, lines crossing at impossible angles, incomplete circles, always broken at the same point. Some markings looked ancient, almost fossilized into the wood of the trees. Others, however, were far too recent, still pale, as if they had been carved that very night. This isn't a warning, Elias murmured. It's a record. Marina nodded. The road is an archive, she said. Every person who passes leaves something behind. A fear, a mistake, an impulse. Renan began to laugh. The sound was low at first, almost a choke, but soon it turned into an uneven, broken laughter that made the others stop immediately. He clutched his head, eyes wide. I can still hear her, he said, between laughs and sobs. She's right there, calling me. The right way this time. Marina approached slowly. Renan, don't listen. It's not wrong, he insisted. Not this time. She speaks the way she always did. No mistake. No distortion. At that exact moment, Elias heard it too. Not Livia's name, his own. But it did not come from the forest. It came from behind. He turned quickly. Just an instant. He was certain he saw someone standing in the middle of the road a few meters behind the group. The silhouette was far too familiar. The posture, the height, the slight tilt of the head. It was himself. When he blinked, the figure was gone. Panic surged up Elias's throat like a reflex. He realized something no one had yet said out loud, but that everyone was beginning to feel. The forest was no longer just copying voices. It was testing identities. Renan took a step toward the trees. I have to go, he said, with a terrifying calm. She won't stop calling. If you go, Marina replied firmly, it won't be you who comes back. Renan smiled emptily. Maybe I'm not whole anymore anyway. Before anyone could stop him, he stepped off the road and into the forest. He did not run. He did not hesitate. He walked as someone who finally recognizes the way home. The group did not follow. No one spoke. The road stretched ahead, longer, quieter, more aware of their presence. Elias felt a horrible certainty forming inside him. The forest now understood the human mind far better, and it was ready to go further. The road began to repeat itself without warning. It was not immediate, nor obvious enough to trigger instant panic. First came the unsettling sense of familiarity, a curve to the left that Elias was certain he had already taken. A fallen trunk at the edge of the asphalt, bearing the same spiral-shaped crack. A specific cluster of trees leaning toward one another, forming a natural arch that felt far too deliberate to be coincidence. We've been here before, Elias said quietly. Ottavio slowed down. No, he replied, though his tone carried no conviction. We've been moving forward the whole time. Marina studied the landscape with growing intensity, her eyes moving rapidly, as if comparing overlapping layers of memory. We have, she said, but not in the same way. The road looked the same, but something was displaced. Small details shifted with each repetition. A symbol carved into a trunk appeared slightly deeper. Marks on the asphalt grew longer. The forest crept a few centimeters closer to the road each time, as if it were slowly closing in. Cycle after cycle. The air grew heavier. Breathing required effort. Not physical effort exactly, but mental. Each breath demanded conscious attention, as if the body were forgetting how to perform automatic movements. Elias noticed he was counting steps, counting heartbeats, trying to maintain some internal order so he wouldn't lose himself. That was when the failures began. Not failures in the environment, but in memory. Elias was absolutely certain Marina had arrived at the road alone. Then he clearly remembered her mentioning a sister. Moments later, that memory unraveled, leaving only the uncomfortable sensation of something that had never truly existed. Ottavio, in turn, claimed he had seen Elias leave the car and walk toward the forest minutes earlier. Something Elias knew he had not done. "The road is mixing us," Marina said, her voice tight. "It takes pieces, tests combination." Fear ceased to be external. Now it lived inside the mind. They arrived again at the clearing, or what should have been the clearing. The space was smaller. One of the vehicles was gone. There were no tire marks, no signs it had been moved. It simply was not there. In the place where open space had once existed, young trees now grew, thin, twisted trunks, as if they had been there for years. Ottavio went pale. "That was the pickup," he murmured. "I was leaning against it." Silence fell heavily. "It's accelerating," Marina said. "When it starts erasing things, it's because it's decided it no longer needs them." A deep cold spread through Elias's chest. "And us?" he asked. "What happens when it decides that about us?" Marina did not answer immediately. Her gaze was fixed on something between the trees. "It doesn't erase everything at once," she said finally. "First, it takes certainty. Then it takes the name. Last, it takes the difference between you and what it created." A sound crossed the clearing. Footsteps. This time, there was no attempt to hide them. The sound came directly from the forest, approaching with deliberate calm. Branches shifted, trunks creaked softly, as if being pushed from the inside outward. A silhouette emerged between the trees. It was human, but it was not a person. The figure walked imperfectly, its movements slightly delayed, as though copying gestures observed from a distance. Its face was partially illuminated by the weak light, revealing features far too familiar. It was Livia, or something wearing her shape. Her eyes were open too wide, fixed, unblinking. Her mouth moved irregularly, opening and closing as if relearning how to use forgotten muscles. "Renan," the thing said in a voice that sounded correct, too correct. Elias felt his stomach twist. Marina took a step back, her face rigid. "That's not her," she said firmly. "It's what was left after the road finished listening." The figure tilted its head slowly, copying the gesture Livia used to make when she was confused. The detail was almost unbearable. "You took the wrong road," the thing said, "but it can still be fixed." Ottavio began to tremble. "How?" he whispered involuntarily. The thing smiled. The smile was too wide, held too long. "Just stay," it replied. "The road learns quickly when you stop resisting." The trees around the clearing began to move, not like plants swayed by wind, but like bodies adjusting position. The road behind them seemed longer now, deeper, as if it had been stretched. Something broke inside Elias's mind. He realized with horrifying clarity that the road did not just want to trap them, it wanted to replace them. After the smile of that thing wearing Livia's face, no one could speak for several minutes. Not because there was nothing to say, but because any word felt too fragile to exist there. The clearing was no longer a meeting point. It had become a provisional, unstable space, as if it could disappear at any moment should the forest decide it had already learned enough. The figure did not advance, nor did it retreat. It remained there, between the trees, now motionless, watching. Its eyes, open far too wide, reflected the weak gray light incorrectly, without depth, like old glass. At some point, without anyone noticing when, it simply stopped being there. There was no sound, no visible movement. The forest closed the space it had occupied, and that was all. As if it had never existed. "She knows how to wait," Marina murmured. "That's the worst part." They returned to the road. Or tried to. The asphalt ahead looked longer than before, stretching in a continuous line that vanished into the low mist. There were no visible curves anymore. Only a path too straight to be real, bordered by trees that seemed to have aligned themselves deliberately, trunk after trunk, like silent spectators. Elias walked feeling something wrong inside his own head. It was not pain, not simple confusion. It was an internal displacement, as if thoughts appeared without a clear origin, memories surfaced without context. He tried to remember his mother's face, and found only a vague, blurred shape. He tried to remember the house where he grew up, and all that came was a road, always the road. "Do you feel this?" he asked at last. Otavio nodded slowly. "My name," he said with difficulty. "It sounds strange now, like I'm repeating someone else's name." Marina stopped walking. "This has started," she said. "The road is taking away what anchors you outside this place." Elias looked at her. "You talk as if you know exactly what's going to happen." Marina took a deep breath. The gesture seemed to cost real effort, because I've been here before. The silence that followed was absolute. "What?" Otavio murmured. "Not on this road exactly," Marina continued, "but on another one just like it, with a different name, a different design, the same intention." She explained slowly, carefully, as if she feared that saying too much might activate something. Years earlier, she had researched disappearances in rural regions, cases where people vanished without leaving traces, without recorded accidents, without bodies. There was always a common point: secondary roads surrounded by ancient forests, poorly documented, rarely used. "They're not places," she said. "They're systems." Elias felt a chill. "Systems of what?" "Observation," Marina replied. "Collection. The road tests human behavior in isolation, fear, attachment, guilt, desperation. When it understands how someone works, it tries to reproduce them." Otavio covered his face with his hands. "And those who don't work? They disappear," she said. "Or they become something else." They walked in silence after that. The road began to change again. Now small variations appeared every few meters. A tree that seemed slightly too tilted. A symbol Elias was certain he had never seen before, yet that felt familiar, as if he himself had passed through there at some point he could no longer remember. Then something happened. Elias stopped hearing footsteps. Not the others. His own. He was walking, but he could not hear the sound of his feet touching the asphalt. He could not feel the impact of his body against the ground. It was as if he were sliding, or as if the world had forgotten how to respond to his presence. "Marina," he called. His voice sounded strange to his own ears. She turned, frowned. "What is it? Can you hear me properly?" She studied him for several seconds. "Too long. Your voice is distant," she said, "like it's coming from somewhere else." Panic surged fast. Elias looked at his own hands. They were still there. They still responded. But something about them felt wrong. Their outlines seemed less defined. Movement left a faint trail in the air, like a poorly rendered image. "No," he murmured. "Oh, no." The road reacted. The mist ahead began to move, condensing into vague shapes. Silhouettes appeared and vanished within it. Some looked human, others did not. Voices began to merge again, but now they did not call names. They called function. "Stay. Observe. Learn. Repeat." Marina grabbed Elias's arm with force. "Look at me," she said. "Don't listen to anything else." He tried, but her face seemed to shift slightly every second, as if it were being recalculated, as if the road were trying to decide which version of her to keep. "If you let it," Marina continued, "it will smooth you out, take away the edges, the doubts, turn you into something compatible." Otavio dropped to his knees. "I can't remember my wife anymore," he said in absolute panic. "I know she existed, but I can't remember her face or her voice. I just know I miss her." The forest responded with a deep sound, almost satisfied. Elias finally understood. The road did not want bodies. It wanted mental models. And now, with him beginning to fail, it was very close to finishing the process. Elias felt himself becoming lighter, even though his body still had weight. It was an impossible contradiction, as if parts of him were being removed without anything physical being torn away. Every thought required effort. Every memory arrived incomplete. like pages ripped from a book he no longer remembered having written. The road seemed to react directly to this. The asphalt began to show long, thin cracks that opened and closed slowly, as if they were breathing. There was no sound of braking, only an organic movement, almost discreet enough to go unnoticed if one were not paying attention. The trees around them leaned a few centimeters more, forming natural corridors that forced the gaze always forward, never backward. Ottavio remained kneeling, his hands buried in his own hair, murmuring names he no longer recognized. They were not complete words. They were fragments, loose syllables that led nowhere. His mind seemed to spin in place, trying to cling to something that had already been removed. "This is what happens before," Marina said, her voice tense but controlled. "Before someone becomes permanent." Elias tried to respond, but realized he had forgotten what he wanted to say. The intention existed clearly for a moment, and then simply dissolved. He blinked several times, trying to stay anchored, repeating his own name mentally like a fragile mantra. Elias. The sound began to lose meaning. "Don't let this happen," he finally managed to say. "Whatever it is, don't let it." Marina closed her eyes briefly. "It's already happening," she replied. "The difference is how much you'll realize while it happens." She stepped a few paces away from the road, moving toward the forest. Not fully inside it, but enough to cross the invisible line everyone had avoided until then. The air around her seemed to distort slightly, like heat rising from asphalt on very hot days. "Marina!" Ottavio shouted, his voice hoarse. "If the road is a system," she said, ignoring the call, "then it has flaws. No structure learns without leaving traces of what it discarded." She began touching the symbols carved into the trunks, one by one, carefully, as if reading an ancient text in Braille. With each touch, something reacted. A deep crack echoed from within the forest. The ground vibrated faintly beneath Elias's feet. "These symbols," Marina continued, "are not warnings. They are attempts. Every failure was recorded here." The mist began to move more intensely, forming denser, heavier masses. Silhouettes emerged within it, some vaguely human, others too distorted for any clear association. Elias recognized fragments of faces. He did not know from where. He did not know from when. "They failed," Marina said now, louder. "You couldn't copy everything. Something was always missing." A deep sound traveled through the entire road. It was not a roar, nor a scream. It was more like the sound of something large being forcibly adjusted, like ancient gears trying to align. Ottavio began to cry. "I don't want to stay here," he said, in pure despair. "I don't want to be forgotten." The forest answered. One of the silhouettes separated from the mist and advanced a few steps. It had no fixed form. Its body seemed unstable, alternating between human proportions and something more elongated, more wrong. Where a face should have been, there was only a smooth surface, occasionally interrupted by features that appeared and disappeared. "You will not be forgotten," the thing said, in a voice composed of many others. "You will be used." Ottavio screamed. He ran, not toward the forest, but down the road, as if linearity could still save him. He ran for long seconds, perhaps minutes, until the asphalt beneath his feet simply ended. There was no hole, no visible fall, just a point where the road ceased to exist. Ottavio took one more step and vanished. There was no sound, no impact. The space closed where he had been, like water returning to its place after something passes through it. Elias fell to his knees. "It's cutting people out," he murmured. "It's finalizing processes," Marina corrected. "You and I are exceptions now, and exceptions disturb systems." She turned back to Elias. "Listen carefully," she said, approaching him. "The road only works while you try to understand it. When you accept it, it wins." "And what do I do?" he asked, his voice barely there. Marina hesitated. "You need to do something it can't register," she replied. "Something that doesn't follow logic, or fear, or the desire to escape." The forest began to advance. The trees moved visibly now, trunks groaning, the ground rearranging itself beneath Elias's feet. The road ahead seemed to multiply, creating forks that appeared and vanished. Elias felt his own outline fail again. He realized with silent terror that he was no longer absolutely certain how many parts of him were still there. And the system was growing impatient. The forest no longer pretended to be still. The trunks groaned like ancient bones being forced to move after centuries of immobility. Roots slowly emerged from the ground, thick and damp, crossing the asphalt like exposed veins. The road lost its solid appearance, undulating almost imperceptibly, as if it were alive, reacting to their presence not with anger, but with focused attention. Elias felt his own body fail in small details. First, weight, then temperature, then the sense of distance. He looked at Marina and struggled to determine whether she stood 2 steps away or 10 meters apart. Space seemed to fold between them, expanding and contracting as his mind tried to keep up. "Focus on me," Marina said, stepping closer. "Don't look at the road. Don't look at the forest. They want you to watch yourself fail." He tried to obey, but his reflection in the glass of one of the cars caught his attention. For an instant he saw his face. And then he didn't. The reflection remained there, breathing, blinking, but Elias felt no connection to that image. It was like looking at someone wearing his shape, but not his presence. "Is that me?" he asked, his voice hollow. "Not completely," Marina replied. "Not yet." She knelt before him, pressing her hand against the asphalt. The moment her fingers touched the surface, symbols began to appear around them, emerging like fresh scars. They were not the same ones Elias had seen before. These were more irregular, incomplete, as if they had been interrupted mid-stroke. "These are errors," she said. "Places where the system failed." The road reacted immediately. The mist condensed into denser, more aggressive form. The silhouettes began to approach, no longer cautious but determined. Elias felt intense pressure in his head, as if something were trying to forcibly reorganize his thoughts, to fit them into acceptable patterns. Voices emerged. They did not call names. They called memory. Fragments of Elias's childhood appeared before him, projected into the air like distorted images. A house he vaguely remembered. A room that may never have existed. A scent too familiar to ignore. The road was trying to give pieces back, but they were not the right ones. "This isn't real," Marina said, raising her voice. "It's improvised." "It feels real," Elias replied. "It feels comfortable." She turned to him urgently. "That's the final stage," she said, "when it offers belonging." The ground trembled. A fissure opened several meters ahead, revealing not an abyss, but more road, descending in layered planes, as if that path existed on multiple levels at once. Elias felt a nauseating certainty that each layer corresponded to a different version of himself. "Choose," said a voice that came from everywhere. "Which one works best?" Elias screamed. The sound came out distorted, multiplied, echoing in wrong ways. He felt the outline of his body vibrate, fail, nearly dissolve. The temptation to simply accept was enormous. There would be no more fear, no confusion, no doubt. "Don't accept it," Marina begged. "Don't become a function." She did something unexpected. She stood and walked toward the forest. "Marina!" Elias tried to call her, but the name came out weak, incomplete. "I've already lost too many parts," she said without turning back. "Maybe that's why I can still make mistakes." She crossed the invisible line separating the road from the woods. The reaction was immediate. The trees moved violently, branches snapping, roots twisting. The mist was pulled into the forest like smoke drawn by an immense force. A deep sound, almost a lament, traveled through the entire space. "Unauthorized system behavior," the voices said. "Uncatalogued act." Elias felt something loosen inside him. Not relief, not hope. Space. For the first time since entering the road, something did not try to fill him. The absence of the forest's control opened a tiny, fragile, but real breach. He struggled to his feet. "Marina," he murmured. There was no answer. The forest began to close the space where she had entered. Trees pressed inward, erasing any trace of passage. Elias felt a sharp pain in his chest, unlike anything he had felt before. It was not fear. It was conscious loss. The road began to reorganize itself. The fissures closed. The silhouettes retreated. The environment assumed an almost normal appearance. Almost calm. Dangerously calm. Elias realized with cruel clarity that the system had made an adjustment. He was no longer a priority. Now, he was a remainder. The silence that followed Marina's loss was not immediate. First came a low sound, almost imperceptible, like the sigh of something enormous settling into place. Then the forest ceased all movement. The trees stood motionless, rigid to an unnatural degree. The mist slowly dissipated, revealing a road that, at first glance, seemed normal. The cracks in the asphalt had vanished. The symbols were no longer visible. The air felt lighter, dangerously light. Elias remained there for an indeterminate amount of time, trying to understand whether he was still being observed or whether he had been forgotten. His heart beat. His body responded. The pain in his chest persisted, concrete signs of existence. He stood carefully, expecting the ground to give way, reality to fracture once more. Nothing happened. The road stretched ahead. There was a curve in the distance. Beyond it, something resembling an intersection. Ordinary modern signs now appeared along the roadside, pointing toward cities Elias recognized. Real names, possible places. The sky above held color, pale but real. He began to walk. Each step felt more solid than the last. The sound of his feet against the asphalt returned. His body seemed to recover weight, density, contour. The internal sense of displacement faded, replaced by a deep, almost comforting exhaustion. "It's over," he murmured without conviction. Further ahead, he found a car parked at the side of the road. It was not one of the vehicles that had arrived with them. It was a common model, doors unlocked, key in the ignition. The radio worked. It played a low song, something old, too familiar to feel strange. Elias hesitated for only a few seconds before getting in. The engine started immediately. As he drove, he noticed the road finally led somewhere. Houses began to appear. Streetlights, a small town, quiet but alive. People walked along sidewalks. A gas station operated normally. Everything seemed correct. Elias pulled over, got out of the car. The ground did not disappear. The air did not distort. No one called his name. A woman stepped out of the gas station and looked at him for a few seconds, with neutral curiosity. "Are you okay?" she asked. Elias opened his mouth to answer, and froze. For a brief moment, too short to be explained, he did not know what to say. He did not know who he was. He did not know where he came from. He did not know what he had lost. The sensation passed quickly, like a common lapse, the kind everyone has. "I just got a little lost," he replied at last. She smiled. "It happens," she said. "These old roads can be confusing." Elias continued on his way after that. Days passed, then weeks, then months. Life returned to a recognizable sequence. He slept, ate, talked, worked. Sometimes in the middle of a sentence, he forgot a simple word. Sometimes he had the impression that someone was walking beside him, even when he was alone. Sometimes he dreamed of trees that leaned too far inward and woke with the feeling of being evaluated. None of it seemed serious, until he began to notice small things. People stared at him for too long. Strangers repeated phrases he had spoken days earlier. Children drew spiral roads without ever having seen anything like them. One night, passing a mirror, Elias stopped. His reflection was there, but it blinked a second after he did. He moved closer, slowly. The reflection did the same, with an almost imperceptible delay. Elias's heart raced. He raised his hand. The reflection hesitated, then followed. "No," he whispered. The reflection smiled. Not a wide smile, not a threatening smile, a functional smile. Elias felt the certainty form inside him, heavy, unavoidable. The road had not freed him. It had not punished him. It had not forgotten him. It had finished learning. He continued living, speaking, walking, existing. But at some invisible point between thought and action, Elias understood something he was never able to explain to anyone. Sometimes, when someone enters a road that should not exist, it is not the person who comes back. It is only something that works well enough. And somewhere between ancient forests and nameless paths, the road remains open, waiting.